So good afternoon, everyone. Today we have another outstanding Authors at Google talk. We're very honored to welcome Bryant Austin to our midst today. He is a conservationist, a photographer first and foremost, and really a storyteller of the whales that are throughout the world. He has, over the past decade or more, embarked on a quest to create large format photography of the world's whales, and his story is extremely fascinating, both from a technical standpoint and for how he is able to change the conversation of whale conservation from away from just the whales jumping out of the water, like the Pacific life visual, to something even more compelling and more direct, which is these like face-to-face interactions with whales and the look in their eyes, so to speak. So we'll invite him on stage, and we also have time for some questions at the end. So please join me in welcoming Bryant to Google. Thank you.
Thank you, Cliff. This is my first time here. It's pretty exciting, so thanks for having me. Is this? So I thought I would do is just give you a little perspective on kind of what led to this. As Cliff was mentioning, I make very big photographs of whales. These are life-size photographs, but also very high resolution. And it's not anything that happened overnight. It's been an evolution. And so I look forward to sharing that with you today. For the past 10 years with whales, I've wanted to create something that would move and inspire someone who has no interest in whales, someone who may eat whales. And I wanted to see if that might be possible. And so I've started this probably in 1998, actually. And I'd been an artist since I was 5, a painter, switched to photography in my 20s, and swam with my first whale in 1994, and took pictures and looked at them, and they just did not convey what I experienced with the whale. And in fact, none of the photographs I've seen of whales underwater convey what one experiences when they're so close to you. And so I gave up photography 20 years ago, photographing whales, and volunteered with many conservation organizations, and really became burned out from that experience. And I was burned out from painting, and so I decided in 1998 to begin photographing marine mammals as an art form with no real agenda. I just wanted to see if I could create something special. And really what was at the core of the work is this idea of decoupling the pressure of making a living from photography from the craft itself. So I started with sea otters, and by the time I was done with sea otters, I started with whales. A professor loaned me his Zodiac from UC Santa Cruz, and I just started to get the courage and the interest to go further offshore. And this was 2003, so I had a boat, a team of volunteers. That was a trailer I lived in for 4 years near the Long Marine Lab. Everything I earned went into this work, experimenting with all kinds of camera equipment. This is a gyro-stabilized Steadicam that I built with the first autofocused medium format camera made by Hasselblad. And I would wait for the most ideal weather conditions. It only happened a couple times a month when winds were less than 5 knots and the sea states were calm. We would go out and cover up to 80 miles a day in search of whales. And during the 4 years of doing this, this was, I think, one of the only photographs I had. It's just this idea of bringing together light, sea states, atmospheric conditions, and behavior, bringing it all together. And that was one of the few photographs. And I was really starting to doubt my pursuits. I wasn't sure if this was something that was a good idea. And towards the end of this time, I had an encounter with a blue whale. And with whales, I didn't know how to photograph them underwater in a way that would inspire unexplored thought and emotion. And above water, I had some ideas, but I never motor up to a whale. I never swim after a whale or pursue them. And now I wait for them to come to me. But at the time, I didn't even know that. I just thought, well, I'm here. I really don't know what to do other than position myself where the light is best. And whenever we'd see a blue whale or a humpback, the boat would drop down to 2 miles an hour, steady course, no changes, and observe. And they're foraging 300 feet down, they're coming up. And one day, a blue whale surfaced right next to the boat, like 6 feet. It was right here. His head was bigger than my boat. My boat was 20 feet long, and there was his head. And this nostril, the blue whales have a splash guard. It looks a lot like our nose. and it just came out of the water, and a 30-foot blow went right up. And then you could hear this sucking sound, this cavernous sucking sound, suggesting this great mass underneath the water. I mean, it was incredible. 4 times the size of our boat. And my legs were shaking. I was forgetting to breathe as I'm composing photographs of this blue silver back rolling in front of me. Through the viewfinder, I could see a rainbow cast in this blow. I could see my own shadow in the blow with the whale's body right there. And I thought, this is it. After 3 years of effort, I've got something. This is what I've been waiting for. And this was the photo that came back. That's actually what it looked like. And it was the only time the film came back unexposed, and I had decided I've got to quit. I'm starting to go down the rabbit hole. I don't have what it takes to keep exploring this, both emotionally and financially. And around the same time, I had already booked a trip to the South Pacific to reacquaint myself with the underwater world of whales, and this was with humpback whales. And I didn't want to go. I couldn't refund it, so I was there. The whole time I'm there, I'm trying to figure out how to rebuild my life when I get back home and stop all this. And this is a really horrible photo, and it just shows you how difficult it is. But it just really, it was in my 3rd week in the South Pacific, and it really just summed it up for me. What's not really being conveyed in this photo, it's 150-foot visibility. That water is over 60 feet deep, and you can see the boulders and all the features on the bottom. You can see their shadow on the bottom. And I thought, this is incredible. It's like I was almost standing on the edge and looking out into the abyss of what I was pursuing. I realized to really explore this, you need to do it full time. And you need to be with these whales for entire seasons, up to 3 months, to see the full spectrum of behavior. And also the person left our group and is swimming after the whale, trying to get photographs and compromising the encounter. The whales are swimming away. And that's very symbolic to me. It's this mentality of scarcity. And we impose it on ourselves. We say, well, I'm only with the whales for 2 weeks or 3 weeks, so I must chase them and pursue them. I got to get the shot to either make this a viable business or to impress my friends. And it's like, no, you've got to decouple from that and just really be willing to work on whale time. And so that realization to me, like, okay, this is it. This is like, I'm looking out at the abyss. It's like, do I want to keep going forward? How do I be present for 3 months with this? How do I do that? I didn't know how, nor was I inspired to do it, and I still wanted to quit. And it was an experience that moved me to tears. I was like, okay, I'm giving up on this, and I'm going to rebuild my life. And by the end of the day, that same day, I was with this mother and calf, and they were about to do something that would shine a light on what I could offer, what I could create. And it started with this whale here. The little calf on the bottom is swimming up to me. And they both kind of churned and came right up to me. And the calf came up to me on a collision course. He was just right at me. And at the last moment, he turned away. And I was using a fisheye lens, which is traditional. I don't use them anymore. They're great for small, like books and calendars and things where you can encompass the whole whale's body in one photo. And that's what I was doing. That's what I was taught. And I knew he was close. And the fisheye makes him look far away. And I thought, I better lower this camera. He's gonna hit my camera with his tail. And I lowered the camera, and this was the last photo I took. And I remember being immediately just taken aback by the sight of a belly button, literally just beyond an arm's reach, going by me, and seeing all their true colors and the fine, subtle details. And I remember appreciating his body, his musculature and blubber and skin just moving and flexing as he was powering down one more time, and he powered down, and that fluke went right by my face like this. And I was just in awe. I mean, this is a 5-week-old calf who has that kind of mind-body awareness in relationship to me, which, why should he be concerned about me? It was really humbling. And I was sitting there trying to process the moment, trying to see if there was something to this that I could pursue. And another moment passed, and then I felt a single, just solid tap on my shoulder. And it was too solid of a tap to be human. And I felt dread as I turned to look. And it was the mother. And she had extended her 15-foot-long pectoral fin that weighs 2 tons, and she touched me with the very tip of it. The camera was to my side, and I was eye to eye with her. She was looking into my eyes, and I immediately saw what was missing, what I could offer. Moments like this, on their terms and on their scale. So she had this expression. It was a very calm, heavy-lidded, mindful gaze, and it's very penetrating. And it was a moment where the word whale just fails. It's a meaningless word, and there's something else there. And And that was it. I had the inspiration, and it took another year and a half to find the courage to pursue it. And here was the idea. If you could see this little black dot, that's a very generous representation of a digital sensor on the biggest camera. And the idea of putting all this information on one sensor on a 45-foot well just seemed it wasn't going to work. And I thought, at best, you could focus on this area and make a portrait, which is one of the things I do. And I was really interested in seeing what happens if I turn the camera on its side and just do a mosaic. And that's what I began. That's the direction I went and explored. And I hadn't quit my job yet. I was trying to live in both worlds. I was trying to do this and keep my day job. And this was a photo from my first season. I sold my truck and all the camera gear I didn't need. I raised enough money for 5 weeks and to begin exploring this process and learning. And I came back with nothing. I mean, this was one of the photos I created, but none were life-size. And I learned a lot, and I was really starting to feel sad about trying to keep both things going. And it was, the depression was really powerful. I remember being in my therapist's office, and she told me something that you never want to hear your therapist say. She just looked at me one day and just said, "I don't know how to help you." And this was a time where I was on the brink of being checked into a crisis center. And I just looked up at her. It just hit me. I remembered that feeling I had when I had the first inspiration. I need to leave all that's safe and familiar. I need to pursue this. And I told her I need to quit my job. and then just everything just drained. I felt fine. And that was 7 years ago. And so off I went. I sold everything I owned. I quit my job at a sea otter research lab. I raised enough funding for 124 days of field work, and this would allow me to learn and explore all the different possibilities to recreate that sensation I experienced 2 years earlier. This is a mother-calf pair. This is one of the whales I would see regularly, and this is him as well. His name is Beethoven. We gave him that name because he would swim down to his mom and rub his back on his mom's body and wave his pectoral fins like a conductor. And this was my one and only attempt to make a composite at that time. The whale on the right swam up to my friend here and immediately did a 180 and came right back at me. And I think I took some photos here. Let's see if this works. So those are some of the photos I took. And you have to remember, I'm 6 feet away from this whale. This is a small whale, probably 27 feet long, probably only 2 years old. Pectoral fins right here. I'm so close that the pectoral fin is going underneath my body just by about this much. And all I see is this wall of whale. He's probably about this tall, which is small for a humpback. And just your entire field of view is enveloped by this body. And then you see this eye approaching. I'm looking through the viewfinder here, and here I'm watching him. And this eye's looking around and looking at me. And sadly, what I learned from this experience was the sun was in the wrong position. It wasn't behind my head. And what I've taken away from that experience is always keep the sun at your back. And that means if a whale comes up to inspect my feet, even if it's 6 feet away, I don't turn to face him. I keep my back to him. And it requires a lot of trust. And my feeling is that our eyes gravitate towards each other. And so I just hold the direction I want, and hopefully they'll come around, and they do occasionally, will come right up and look at me. They don't like to look in the sun either because our eyes are very sensitive to light, but it's the only way these photographs can be made. They don't like strobes. And this is Beethoven again. I had made this, the inspiration was really powerful. It was to the point I couldn't ignore it. So I'm doing my best to just follow it. And every step of the way when you make all these big decisions, you quit your job, you sell everything you own, and you're like, well, how do I feel? And it's like, no, I still feel good. This is the right thing. And there's no other choice, and I keep going. But by the end of those 124 days, I had nothing. And I was still learning, and I was looking at the prospect of coming home with nothing. And for the first time in 2 years, I was thinking, I'm going to have to quit and rebuild my life. This is insanity. I'm just going so far down the rabbit hole now that I have to quit. And I had a sleepless night. I had just a few weeks left, and I remember I didn't sleep at all and just filled with anxiety and just a lot of regret. And we went back out to sea that morning, And within a half hour, I reunited with Beethoven and his mom. And his mom was about 60 feet down, and Beethoven was doing the same old thing, you know, rubbing his back on her. And Mom started to come up to surface to have a look, and she got really close, and Beethoven swam off, and I lost track of him, and I thought, uh-oh, where'd he go? And Mom was 12 feet down, and she just rolled up and looked at me, and her eye went wide, and I knew something was up, and then my body just moved forward at the surface like this. I'm on snorkel, and I felt this pressure against my back and my head, and I strained to look up, and I saw the underside of a whale go over the top of my head and stop right here, and I lowered my camera, and this pec fin came around and just went right against my chest and pressed me to his belly, and we stayed there together and breathed at the surface. And I didn't want to startle him, so I just stayed there, and my assistant was in the water, and she grabbed my arm and just separated us gently, and we went back in the boat. I've had strange events where I've wanted to quit, and then something like that happens. It's happened several times. And the very next day, I composed what would be my only life-size portrait of a whale during that time. And this is another calf, a 5-week-old calf we named Mozart. And you know, when you learn something, you're learning, you're developing, you're making a lot of mistakes. And you know, when you're 6,000 miles from home, it's hard to just say, well, you know, I need this kind of lens. I need a more portrait lens. You can't, you know, just go online and get one from B&H Photo. So you're kind of committed to the mistakes you've made with the lens choices. And I realized the lens I had was too wide. I really need something narrow, because the more narrow the field of view, the more pixels per feature. And that's really important when you want to capture the eye. And this whale and his mom swam around me for 20 minutes. Mozart had his pec fin out like this, and Mom's dorsal fin was like this, so he's hitching a ride. They're just cruising around, going around me, coming closer and closer. Finally, they were underneath me, about 15 feet, and Mozart just went like this and separated from his mom and came right up to see me. He was less than 3 feet from my camera when I took this picture. And it's like he overcame all my mistakes, and I took this picture. And that was it. This was my last photograph from the season. This is just me saying goodbye on my last day before I flew back to the States. And really, that portrait of Mozart was my only currency. To print and mount the work, I had to sell my underwater camera gear and fully commit to this. And started my first show 8 months later, and really just began the process of putting the work out there. And during that time, it was a 2-year time between field seasons, and I thought about this whale a lot. This is Mozart's mother, and this is probably 10 feet away. And I thought, hey, look at this. This is great. I can make a life-size portrait of an adult whale. And when I zoomed it up, enlarged it, the eye just fell apart. It was just blobs of color. And I realized I would have to be closer than 10 feet. And that concerned me more than, you know, fundraising or getting commissions than anything else. And it took years to overcome that. And it wasn't until 2008 I was invited to exhibit my work at the International Whaling Commission meeting in Santiago, Chile. And this is a security detail there. It's a very highly politicized, polarized event. It could be pretty compelling and dramatic with the opposition. And instead of being outside with the signs, I was able to come inside with the work. And we had an exhibition in the lobby where all the delegates walked by every day to the conference venue. Even asked if we could include the portrait outside the conference room where they have coffee, and they said it was with no text. And they said it'd be too controversial to have a portrait of a healthy whale just there. So that actually gave me hope. This was a photo of the actual exhibit in the lobby. Had a reception. It was really an incredible time. My last couple of days there, I met this gentleman, Peter Hall, who's the CEO of Hunter Hall Ethical Managed Funds, who ultimately commissioned me to create my largest work. And it would be the largest work I could create that would be shown in Norway and Japan for the first time. And so in 2009, I started this process with him. And it's really simple. It's what would happen with a 50 megapixel camera, a portrait lens, like a 50 or 80 millimeter, so it's very narrow, and from 6 or 5 feet away from a whale's eye. What would that look like? You know, it's really exciting, but it's never happened before. It's never been done. And I just was really curious to see what that would happen. So Peter was able to make that possible. And right after New Year's Day, as soon as the camera arrived, it was one of the first batch of cameras that were sent out. I went to the Eastern Caribbean to work with sperm whales. And I was actually in search of a specific family known as the Group of Seven. And in that family, there is one whale who's known to tolerate people in the water and who might even come close. And Peter was able to fund 5 weeks of field work, which is a terribly short amount of time, but I was grateful. And I thought, if I only have 5 weeks, I need to find a whale that may allow me to finally create a full body composite of a whale's body. And I spent 5 weeks there, like I said, and I never found the Group of Seven. And I was looking at coming home with nothing once again. And I went out my last full day, and I saw, during this whole time, I never found the Group of Seven. This was another whale, and I saw this whale over and over. And it seemed like he was tolerating me more and more every time we're in the water. When I'm in the water, it's snorkel. I'm motionless. I don't swim after them. I just observe. And I want to allow them to explore any natural curiosity they may have of me. And this is what might encourage a very close inspection, which is really critical to making these photographs. And this whale never came close enough, but on my last encounter, he was about 8 feet away. And we just kind of swam together like this, side by side. And I would compose pictures. And he opened his jaw, which normally is a threat display. But he shot out a squid tentacle at me. It was about this big and about that big around. And I regretted not taking it, because I thought maybe it was stuck between his teeth, but it was too big. And it just started to open my eyes about how you can communicate intention with a whale just by showing up every day for 3 months or 5 weeks, whatever you can do, being respectful and consistent, and just being in their presence and giving them the space to explore their own natural curiosity. So to have that consistency, visually everything I wear is the same boat. For the acoustic signature, they can become familiar with that. And that's what really inspired that. And as I was saying earlier, on my last day of the 5 weeks, I've met this whale. He's a 2.5-year-old calf, and his mom swam by very closely to me. Not close enough again, but she kind of moved her tail like this by me, and I was like, whoa. And I took a picture of her tail, and I was going home within days, and I thought, okay, great, I have a life-size photo of a tail, or part of a tail, and we'll just make it big and share it anyway, and just see what I can do. And she dove to 1,000 feet and was down for 45 minutes, and this is her calf. His name is Enigma, and I surfaced. I came up to look around. I saw a friend of mine. We just became friends. His name is Shane Garrow. He's a sperm whale biologist who studies the social biology of Caribbean sperm whales. And he just looked at me and said very casually, this is the Group of Seven you're with. And I thought, okay, this one whale named Scar might be here, and hopefully this will allow me to make these big photographs. And I hadn't seen him yet, but Scar's younger cousin was here. And he was swimming around me. His other 2.5-year-old cousin was in the family too, nursing. So he didn't really have anything to do. And the mothers and the aunts share the nursing duties, and they babysit while the mom is foraging. And so I just stayed motionless. He swam around me. He finally settled probably 5 feet, 6 feet from me, and he gave me his right profile, or his left profile first, then left profile. This is his left profile. I hope you can see it okay. And this is the first time that I was able to capture, this is probably 5 feet away, with an 80 millimeter lens and a 50 megapixel sensor. I was starting with 50, and I learned that 50 wasn't doing it, but at the time it stopped working, so I had to switch to another lens, and that turned out to be the right choice. And yeah, I'm sorry you can't see the detail. It's a little too dark right now, but I was really excited just to see that. And he gave me about a half hour sitting. And so I composed 300 photographs of his body in sections about this wide. And I took the 15 best photographs and blended them together in Photoshop. And I'll share with you, let's see if this works. Is this going to do it? Oh, there we go. This was the first one I created. I flew home within days after this encounter. We had to build a computer that could complete this. It's probably a 40 gigabyte file with all the layers. And I think it was using maybe 200 gigabytes of memory, which we would use, that we would get that from scratch disk to handle it. It takes like a half hour to save. It measures 5 by 20 feet. And I just had a lot of gratitude for this whale to give me that opportunity. After that happened, I met his cousin. I just got on the boat, changed my battery, my memory card, and I remember sitting out by the swim step, and I just heard my skipper say, "Hey, look down." This whale was coming up to the boat. He was upside down, which I speculate they could see with both eyes when they present their belly and gauge your distance. And I got in the water, and he swam right under me. And I remember picking up my legs, so, like just going like this, just to let him pass underneath me. And I took this photograph, and he was preparing for his foraging dive, so he wasn't going to spend very much time with me, and he dove. And later in the day, I saw him one more time, and this was my last encounter with him, and I'll never forget it. It's the encounter that comes to mind most of all when I'm asked, what does it feel like to swim with a whale? Let me show you. This is what's going on underneath the surface. This is all I could see. He swam right up to me with his lower jaw open, which can be a threat display, so I wasn't sure if he was testing me. And his head's about this high and about this wide. He's a very small whale. He's probably 24 feet. I'm guessing 10 tons maybe or more. If he fully matures, he could reach 70 feet. Historically, that's how big they get. And I remember feeling this dread again as his head loomed closer, and it finally pushed up against my body. And I remember putting my hand on a whale and touching a whale for the first time and pushing off. And I remember being humbled just by the basic observation of his body not moving when I push away. And he then just heeled over 45 degrees and came forward to meet my eye. This is that right profile. And as he came forward, his jaw was still open, and it was open underneath my body. I was flat. And I remember looking down, just making sure that my feet were not going inside his mouth. And he has a history of grabbing fins. He's very tactile. It's like an opposable thumb for him. It's not anything malicious, but they will feel you. And so I just stayed flat, and I wondered, what's going on? Is he testing me? And I realized I had to take pictures, so I just turned over my complete trust to him and started taking pictures of him. And the thing to think about, with this whale, when I'm asked what it feels like to swim with a whale and to be this close to a whale's eye looking at you, I always think of this one encounter. And the thing to keep in mind with sperm whales, they're the largest toothed predator on the planet, and they possess the largest brain ever to exist on Earth. It's up to 7 times the size of our own. They're complex social animals who have been shaping their culture and communication for over 5 million years in their modern form. So if you imagine a brain that size evolving culturally for 5 million years, that's 25 times longer than our fossil record. They're very complex animals, and really the only word that comes to mind when I experience something like this, the only word that describes it is that it's disturbing. And it comes from the realization of realizing we may not be alone in the universe, that there's some intelligent, conscious life in the oceans that we can't measure yet. And all you have is this eye-to-eye exchange, and this tangible knowing of something. And really that's why I create this work, is to inspire the next generation of biologists, engineers, many disciplines, artists, to want to know, and I don't think enough of us want to know yet. And with all the emerging technologies, it's my hope that we can at least measure and know. Because what really concerns me most of all is the thought of losing over 5 million years of evolving culture and communication in the largest brain ever to exist on Earth, and to never know what we lost. And that to me is the biggest tragedy. This 2 years later, I reunited with him, and this kind of gives you an idea of a typical workflow. This is his head, this is his blowhole, his dorsal fin, that's my head right there. And he gave me a 4-minute sitting during this reunion, and I composed 144 photographs along his body. And this is what it looks like underwater. This is my largest photograph. Let's see if this works. There it goes. It measures 10 by 36 feet. Has over 20 photographs in it. It's a 60 gigabyte file. I have to keep flattening it. It has probably 200 layers to it in Photoshop. It uses probably 370 gigabytes of memory, which I supplement by using solid-state hard drives in RAID 0. I'll use up to 12 of them to act as a scratch disk. There's his PEC fin. You can see his digits. They have fingers like us in their PEC fin. And I haven't printed and mounted it yet. It will be an original photograph. I want it to have the same feeling of impermanence and fragility that they have out there, and I want it to be special for people that see it. Digital is exciting, but for me it's the means, not the end. And so I want to create something special with digital, but not necessarily make it something else. So yeah, now we're getting to his tail. When it's printed and mounted, it'll weigh 1,200 pounds. And that's the other reason I haven't printed and mounted yet. It needs a home. Let's see. During 2009, I was also commissioned to work with the most heavily hunted whale in the world. It's the minke whale. This was on the Great Barrier Reef in Australia. If any of you are interested in swimming with whales, I'm happy to share information with you, but I highly recommend the Great Barrier Reef. There's only a 5-week window. Nobody knows why, but the dwarf minke whales there become incredibly inquisitive to boats and people in the water, and they do come up to you very close. This is a whale I spent 5 days with out of 5 weeks, and as many as 6 hours in a day. Let me share some more photos over here. This is what's going on underwater. This is still Ella. She is probably 3 feet away in this photograph. I would wake up in the morning from our anchorage. We're probably 15 miles offshore, and I'd pour a cup of coffee and look out the porthole, and the dorsal fin would go by, and then another one, and at times there would be 14 whales circling our boat in a figure-8 pattern. And most often Ella would be in there, and I'll share, hopefully these photos will show okay. This is, I'll also give you kind of an idea. This is a portrait of Ella, a life-size portrait. This is 4 by 5 feet. But the problem is the camera has one autofocus point, the Hasselblad, and so all the eyes are in the center of the picture, which isn't really ideal. And also that one autofocus point focuses on particles. So I've been eye to eye, a whale looking at me right here, and it's focusing on all the stuff in the water. And the whale's out of focus, and I'm in tears. But you could just add another photograph and offset it, and I'll show you a little bit of detail. Hopefully it'll show up okay, but this gives you an idea of just how much information is there. This is probably my most detailed photograph of a whale's eye. That was Ella's left eye. This is Ella's right eye. You can see it's really dark over here. She's 4 feet underneath me. I'm floating flat. She's going like this. That dark spot is the shadow cast from my body. I had to wait for her eye to come out of my shadow to compose that picture, and it was like 8 o'clock in the morning, so the sun was really illuminating her eye. Let's see if there's a little bit more detail. After I took this photo, I was being transferred at sea. I had to go to another boat, so I had to get out. The crew put me on a skiff. We went to another vessel, and I was shocked to see her and about 3 other whales follow us to the other boat. I immediately just grabbed my camera and went back in and kept photographing her. This gives you an idea of the workflow. This looks a little chaotic. There are probably 15 photographs that I start with, and they ultimately look like this. You can see all the layers that go into all the adjustments, all the color adjustments, the tones, all kinds of little photographs that you pull in. Some I have to create. Sometimes I have to create water from scratch if I don't photograph water by itself after the encounter. This is the finished photograph. This was at the Tamada Museum in Tokyo in 2010. And I'll just do say, oh, there it goes. Okay. This photo is 6 by 30 feet. And it's my largest photo so far that's been printed and mounted. There's only one company in the United States that can print and mount this size in a clean room to archival standards, and they're in New York. And so it's a big deal every time they're made. You can see like all the flakes of skin on her body. These are all the subtle things that make them real, and that's what I explore with my work with whales, bringing out every subtle detail of them and that make them real. And really, what I want to achieve is I want to give you a memory of what a whale really looks like. Less than 1/1,000,000th of 1% of the human population will ever be eye to eye with whales the way I've been, and so they're essentially reduced to words and small pictures, and they're not really a part of our lives, or they don't really move us in ways that they have the potential to do so. And that's a big motivation for my work. So that last photo of Ella, those last photos of Ella were taken 4 weeks before my very first show in Oslo, Norway. Norway is a country that commercially hunts whales, as well as Iceland and Japan. And Peter had commissioned my first exhibition there. And the goal wasn't necessarily to end whaling. That takes a tremendous amount of investment of time. You have to be on the ground for years doing all kinds of work. Work that isn't polarizing, though. There's sharing beautiful photos of whales, sharing stories, and sharing in a way that you're allowing your viewer to have complete freedom to explore their own curiosity, the way I do the same with whales. And you don't want to take that away from anybody, even if it's in a country that hunts whales, because once you do that, you close the door to change. You become set in your ways. And what was inspiring was the response. The first show was only 2 days in Oslo. We had 2,000 people show up. Coverage on television, newspaper, magazine, online, and it was all positive. And we had a completely new dialogue about whales with the journalists in that country. Normally, it's highly polarized with the NGOs that I've partnered with, and we were all surprised that we could have this different dialogue. And mainly, they wanted to know, how can you get so close to a whale without them hurting you? And the storytelling really became an important part. And the same thing held true in Japan. It just was really heartwarming to know that whales could be received this way. And we perceive these countries as not liking whales, and realizing that they do, and it just generates so much excitement. And it's given me hope to draw attention to the far more serious global scale issues whales face. Whaling makes up less than 1% of what's killing them. Commercial hunting of cetaceans, I should say, whales, dolphins, and porpoises. The number one culprit is fisheries bycatch, entanglement, and fishing gear, where over 300,000 whales, dolphins, and porpoises die every year for our love of seafood. And that's something I'm exploring ways to gently introduce into our world and the consequences of it. One thing I'm working to do is create a full-body, life-size composite photo of a living whale entangled in fishing gear, and that's something that it's a major project. Safety is paramount. The whale's well-being is paramount. A lot has to go into play, but it's really my goal is to make this a visual reality that defies words. I have. My work is currently on exhibit at the Museum of Monterey. It's the first time all these large photographs have been exhibited together in North America, and it'll be up till Labor Day of this year. And I think that covers my introduction. My book, Beautiful Whale, is here. It just released last week. It's my first photography book, and I'm really excited. I hadn't planned on doing a book and was encouraged to really consider it, and I'm grateful I did. And I thank all of you for coming out today.
Particularly bad smelling?
Oh,
Minke
no.
whales?
There's a story about the name. It was named after a Norwegian whaler named Minke. It was his name, and they were hunting blue whales. I don't know when this was. It may have been 50 years ago, and he said, "Oh, a blue whale," and the crew found out it was it's one of the smallest baleen whales, and they named it. We're gonna name it after him. It's a Minke whale. So I think that's how it started, is what I'm told.
So obviously, underwater photography is a big Everest in the photography world. It's very difficult. There's a lot of equipment that's involved.
Yeah.
What sort of advice do you have for people getting started in that medium?
I would just, it's scary. There's two ways you can go. You can immediately go into a way that's lucrative, that produces results financially, and you can just create that way. Or you could go the other way, where you have an interest in something, but it's not very well defined, and you have this thing you want to achieve, and you just have to be willing to say, I don't know, and then just go and explore, and just decouple from the financial pressure of trying to make a lucrative photography career initially, and just create and explore, and it's okay not to know. And my experience in doing that is that I've created something way beyond my imagination, and that's just, that's what I recommend. Oh.
You always you see whale watching tours when you
Sure.
go to major tourist areas. What sort of guidelines should people be looking for in terms of reputable companies? Like, what should you consider when you're going on a whale viewing experience?
It's so varied. There are operators that don't behave very well, and there are some that are very reputable. It's different in other parts of the world. I would be happy. Anyone that wants to either go whale watching or swim with whales, I have my business cards here. Just feel free to email me. I can send you information. There are specific companies that I know all around the world that are just very respectful of whales. And the thing that is subtle about that, being respectful and not chasing them, not pursuing them, not behaving badly, which is so common, is that often the whales will just come to you. And so there are operators I can personally recommend in at least 4 countries. So please, I'll have my contact information here. So thank you again.